You see this money, I must make it no matter what. Not even my village people can stop me. I will make my mama proud.
They say desperation is the mother of bad decisions. Kwame was about to prove this theory correct in the most spectacular way possible. Kwame's relationship with money could best be described as it's complicated, except there was nothing complicated about it. Money simply didn't like him. They had met briefly once in 2019 when his uncle sent him 5,000 naira for his birthday, but the reunion lasted exactly 47 minutes before his landlord appeared at his door like a bill collector from the underworld. Living in a small room in Ajege, Lagos, Kwame had perfected the art of survival. He knew exactly which church was serving jollof rice after Sunday service. He had memorized the schedule of every Owambe party in his neighborhood, where he wasn't invited but would show up anyway, armed with a confident smile and a story about being the bride's cousin's friend's brother. His stomach had its own Google Maps for free food. His morning routine was a symphony of poverty. He would wake up at 5 a.m. not because he was hardworking, but because his neighbor's generator would start making sounds like a dying elephant, making sleep impossible. He would brush his teeth with a toothbrush so old that the bristles had given up on life, lying flat like a tired man on a Lagos Danfo bus. His bathroom slippers had holes so big that his toes waved at passers-by like friendly neighbors. But the most tragic part of Kwame's existence was his phone. The phone was an ancient Nokia that had survived 3 presidents, 2 economic recessions, and a flood. It could only do 3 things: receive calls, send text messages, but only if he typed very slowly, and die at the most inconvenient moments. The battery life was so unpredictable that Kwame had developed anxiety. He would be in the middle of a conversation and suddenly, bam, the phone would shut down as if it had just received terrible news. His wardrobe consisted of 3 shirts that he rotated like a DJ mixing songs. There was the interview shirt, white, with a mysterious yellow stain near the armpit that refused to leave despite several washing attempts, the casual Friday shirt, blue, missing 2 buttons, and the emergency shirt, black, which he wore when the other 2 were wet and he needed to step out urgently. His trousers were so shiny from excessive ironing that they could blind someone on a sunny day. Every morning, Kwame would open his email with the hope of a drowning man reaching for a rope. His inbox was a graveyard of rejection letters. Dear applicant, we regret to inform you. Thank you for your interest, however. We have decided to move forward with other candidates who, one company didn't even bother with a proper rejection. They just sent him an emoji. The job market in Lagos was brutal. Kwame had applied for positions as a data analyst. He barely understood Excel. A content creator. He once posted a blurry photo of his lunch and got 0 likes. A social media manager. His own Facebook page had 8 followers, 3 of which were fake accounts he created. And even a chief happiness officer at a startup. He didn't get the job because during the interview, he looked too sad. His friends had started avoiding him. Not because they didn't like him, but because every conversation somehow ended with Kwame asking to borrow money. He had developed a technique. First, he would ask about their family. Then, he would laugh at their jokes, even when they weren't funny. Then, he would casually mention how his neighbor's cat died. He didn't have a neighbor with a cat. And finally, when their defenses were down, he would strike. Abeg, you fit borrow me 2,000 naira. I go return am on Friday. Friday, of course, was a mythical day that existed in theory but never in practice. It was a Tuesday morning, the most depressing day of the week because it wasn't close enough to the weekend to be exciting, nor was it Monday when you could still have hope. Kwame was lying on his mattress, which was so thin that he could feel every spring, and the springs had names. He called them pain, suffering, and why me Lord. Scrolling through his email with the enthusiasm of a man reading his own obituary. Rejection. Rejections. Spam email from a prince in Zimbabwe. Rejection. Advertisement for a loan he couldn't qualify for. Rejection. Then, like a miracle from heaven, he saw it. Subject urgent. Interview invitation. Supreme Hustle Incorporated. Kwame sat up so fast that he nearly broke his back. His heart started beating like an agbero, chasing a stubborn driver. With trembling fingers, he opened the email. Dear Kwame Okonkwo, congratulations. After careful review of your CV, which you sent us 3 times, we are pleased to invite you for an interview at Supreme Hustle Incorporated. We are one of the fastest growing companies in Lagos. We grew from 2 employees to 4 employees in just 3 years. We are looking for a dynamic, motivated, passionate individual who can work in a fast-paced environment and is not afraid of challenges. Interview date tomorrow. Time 10 a.m. sharp. African time not accepted. Location plot 47B, behind the abandoned warehouse, after the mechanic workshop, before the place where they sell suya. Take the 3rd left after the gutter, Ajao Estate. Please come prepared to start immediately. Best regards, Chief Operations, everything. Supreme Hustle Incorporated. Kwame read the email 7 times, then he read it backward to make sure it wasn't a scam. Then he showed it to his neighbor, Emeka, who also confirmed that it looked legitimate, though he warned, "My brother, any company we their office day behind abandoned warehouse, you suppose think twice." But Kwame was beyond thinking. He was in the acceptance speech at an award ceremony phase. He practiced his interview responses in the mirror. "What's your greatest weakness?" the mirror asked. "My greatest weakness is that I work too hard," Kwame replied to his reflection, trying to look serious. "Sometimes I forget to eat because I'm so focused on achieving excellence." This was a complete lie. Kwame's greatest weakness was actually that he took 3-hour lunch breaks and had once fallen asleep during a video conference call, waking up to find out he had been muted the entire time and everyone saw him sleeping with his mouth open. That night, Kwame couldn't sleep. He kept imagining his new life. He would finally be able to afford 3 square meals. He would buy new slippers, ones without holes. He would open a bank account that had more than 3 digits. He would stop pretending to be on phone calls when his landlord knocked for rent. He spent 2 hours ironing his interview shirt, trying to make the yellow armpit stain less visible. He polished his shoes with Vaseline because he didn't have actual shoe polish. He rehearsed his handshake, firm but not too firm, confident but not aggressive, professional but friendly. At 3 a.m., he was still awake, staring at the ceiling, his mind racing with possibilities. At 6 a.m., his alarm, which was actually his neighbor's alarm that he could hear through the thin walls, went off. Kwame jumped out of bed like a soldier. Today was the day his life would change. Getting to Ajao Estate from Ajege was an adventure that required careful planning, divine intervention, and a small miracle. Kwame's total budget for transportation was 200 naira. He had borrowed it from his neighbor with a solemn promise to return it next week, another mythical time period. He walked to the bus stop, practicing his interview answers as he went. People passing by looked at him strangely as he muttered to himself, "I am a team player who also excels at independent work. I am flexible yet consistent. I am ambitious but humble." The first Danfo bus was so packed that passengers were hanging out like Christmas decorations. The conductor was screaming, "Oshodi! Oshodi! Enter with your money-o!" But Kwame needed to go to Ajao Estate, not Oshodi. He waited. The second bus had a sign that said Ajao Estate. But when Kwame tried to board, the conductor looked at him and said, "This bus is for people going to work, not for people going to beg for work." Kwame didn't know whether to be offended or impressed by the man's savage observation skills. Finally, a third bus arrived. Kwame squeezed himself in between a woman with a basket of tomatoes and a man who smelled like he had bathed in palm oil. The journey took 45 minutes, during which Kwame prayed 17 times, held his breath 12 times when they passed through areas with questionable smells, and nearly died 3 times. Lagos drivers have a special relationship with death. They flirt with it constantly. When he finally alighted at Ajao Estate, he checked the email again for the address. Behind the abandoned warehouse, after the mechanic workshop, before the suya spot, 3rd left after the gutter. He asked a malam selling recharge cards, "Please, do you know Supreme Hustle Incorporated?" The malam looked at him with deep pity in his eyes. "My friend, you sure say you want to go there?" "Yes, I have interview," Kwame replied proudly. The malam shook his head slowly, the way people shake their heads at funerals. "May God be with you." This should have been a warning sign, but Kwame was too desperate to read the signs. A billboard could have fallen from the sky with the words, "Turn back now," written in red, and Kwame would have walked around it. He followed the directions. Behind the abandoned warehouse, check. After the mechanic workshop, check. Before the suya spot, his stomach grumbled with longing, check. Third left after the gutter, he nearly fell into said gutter, check. And there it was, Supreme Hustle Incorporated. The building looked like it had given up on life. The paint was peeling like a snake shedding its skin. 2 of the windows were broken and covered with cardboard. There was a signboard that read Supreme Hustle Inc., but the letters were so faded that it looked more like Sure UNC. A lizard was doing push-ups on the doorstep, and Kwame suspected the lizard might actually be an employee. Kwame's survival instinct screamed, "Run!" But his bank account balance of 75 naira and 50 kobo whispered, "Just try it. What's the worst that could happen?" Kwame would soon discover exactly what the worst could be. He took a deep breath, straightened his shirt, which made the armpit stain more visible, and walked through the door. The reception area was interesting. There was a desk made from what appeared to be old planks of wood held together by prayer and duct tape. Behind the desk sat a woman whose face suggested that she had not smiled since 1987. "Good morning," Kwame said cheerfully. "I'm here for the interview." The receptionist looked at him the way one might look at a cockroach in their soup, with disgust mixed resignation. "Name," she said, not, "What is your name?" or "May I have your name, please?" Just name, like a police officer interrogating a suspect. Kwame Okonkwo. She checked a list that had exactly 2 names on it. His was one of them. The other name had been crossed out with the word escaped written next to it in red ink. This should have been warning sign number 73. But Kwame was no longer counting. "Sit," the receptionist commanded, pointing at a bench that looked like it had been stolen from an abandoned school. Kwame sat and immediately felt a spring poke him in a place that should not be poked. He shifted. Another spring. He shifted again. He was now sitting at an angle that defied the laws of physics. He waited for 30 minutes. During this time, the receptionist did not smile once. She did not speak. She did not even blink. Kwame began to wonder if she was actually alive or if this was some weekend at Bernie's situation. Suddenly, a door burst open with such force that the building shook. A man emerged, or rather, exploded from the office. He was wearing a suit that looked like it had been purchased during the military regime. His face was red like fresh pepper, and he was screaming into 2 phones simultaneously. "I said 12 o'clock, not 12:15, he yelled into one phone. "No excuses. Excuses are for weak people," he screamed into the other. He noticed Kwame and stopped. The sudden silence was somehow more terrifying than the screaming. "You. Interview. Now," he barked, pointing at Kwame like a general commanding a soldier. Kwame stood up so fast that he left part of his soul on the bench. He followed the man into the office, which was decorated in a style that could best be described as organized chaos meets abandoned storage unit. There were papers everywhere. The desk was buried under files. There was a calendar on the wall from 2017. A fan stood in the corner not plugging, just standing there like a retired employee who refused to leave. "Sit," the man commanded. Kwame sat on a chair that made a sound like a dying goat. The man stared at him for a full minute without blinking. It was a power move. Kwame had read about this in a blog post titled 10 Interview Tricks Employers Use to Intimidate You. He stared back, trying to look confident, but his left eye started twitching nervously. "So," the man finally spoke, his voice like gravel being chewed. "Tell me about yourself." Kwame launched into the speech he had rehearsed 17 times. "Sir, I am a dedicated, hardworking, passionate—" "Boring," the man interrupted, slamming his hand on the desk so hard that a calculator jumped. "I don't want your rehearsed nonsense. Tell me, can you work under pressure?" This was it, the moment, the question that would determine Kwame's fate. Kwame knew the truth. He could not work under pressure. He once cried at work because his boss asked him to send an email before 5 p.m. and it was already 4:45 p.m. He had panic attacks when his phone received too many notifications at once. His idea of pressure was deciding which television show to watch, but 75 naira and 50 kobo was doing the talking now. "Sir," Kwame said, sitting up straight, his voice full of fake confidence, "pressure is my middle name. In fact, my full name is Kwame Pressure Handles Stress Like Breakfast Okonkwo. I eat pressure for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, sometimes even as a snack." The man's eyes widened. I have worked under financial pressure, emotional pressure, spiritual pressure, family pressure, atmospheric pressure, blood pressure. I have handled them all, sir. Kwame was on a roll now, lying with the confidence of a politician during election season. In my last job, which I totally had and didn't make up just now, I managed 15 projects simultaneously while mentoring 20 staff members and organizing monthly team building exercises where I had to catch chickens blindfolded. This last part just came out. Kwame had no idea where it came from. The man leaned back in his chair, which screamed in protest, and smiled. It was not a warm smile. It was the smile of a cat that had just trapped a mouse. Perfect, he said. You're hired. You start immediately. Kwame's heart soared. Finally, employment, salary, relevance. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. You won't regret this. I will work hard, and your desk is outside. First task, I need you to organize all the files in this office alphabetically by tomorrow morning. Kwame looked around the office. There were approximately 4,000 files scattered like refugees fleeing a war zone. Tomorrow morning? Kwame's voice cracked. Is there a problem? The man's smile disappeared. I thought you could handle pressure? No problem, sir. No problem at all. Tomorrow morning, alphabetically. Consider it done. Good. Also, I need you to answer all calls on that phone. He pointed at an ancient telephone that looked like it had witnessed the independence. Yes, sir. And when I press this bell, he showed Kwame a small bell that looked like it belonged in a church. You must appear in my office within 5 seconds. Doesn't matter what you're doing. Even if you're in the bathroom, you have 5 seconds. Understood? Understood, sir? Also, lunch break is 5 minutes. 5 minutes? Is there a problem? No, sir. 5 minutes is plenty. I can eat very fast. This was true. Kwame had once eaten an entire plate of rice and stew in under 2 minutes when he heard his landlord knocking. Good. Your salary is 30,000 naira per month. 30,000. Kwame's heart sang. That was 400 times his current bank balance. However, the man continued, we pay salary every 3 months. Kwame's heart stopped singing. And there's a probation period of 6 months where you receive half salary. His heart died completely. Any questions? Kwame had approximately 73 questions, but his mouth said, no, sir. Thank you, sir. Welcome to Supreme Hustle Incorporated. Try not to cry on your first day. And with that, Kwame's journey into madness officially began. Kwame's desk was not actually a desk. It was a wooden board balanced on 2 cement blocks. His chair was a plastic stool that had 3 legs instead of 4, which meant he had to sit at a very specific angle or risk falling over like a drunk uncle at a wedding. The phone, that ancient device his boss had mentioned, sat on the desk like a cursed artifact. It was the kind of phone that had a rotary dial. Kwame had only seen such phones in old Nollywood movies from the 1990s. He stared at it, wondering if he would need to take a training course just to answer it. Before he could contemplate further, the phone rang. Not a normal ring. This phone screamed like it was being attacked. Ring, 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 ring. Kwame grabbed it. Hello, Supreme Hustle Incorporated. How may I... Where is Mr. Badmus? A voice shouted from the other end. I don't know who. You don't know your boss. What kind of useless company is this? I just started today. Click. The person hung up. Before Kwame could process what happened, the phone rang again. Ring, 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 ring. Hello, Supreme Hustle. Is this the company that owes my brother money? I don't handle accounts. Tell your boss he will see what I will do to him. Click. The phone rang 17 more times in the next 10 minutes. Each caller was angrier than the last. One woman called to curse the entire company in 3 different languages. Another man called just to laugh maniacally and hang up. A child called asking if they sold ice cream. Kwame's head was spinning, and he hadn't even started organizing the files yet. Speaking of files, he walked into his boss's office to begin the task. What he saw made his soul leave his body temporarily. Files were everywhere. On the desk, under the desk, behind the desk, on top of the cabinet, under the cabinet, inside boxes, outside boxes, on the floor, arranged in piles that looked like the Leaning Tower of Pisa, stuck to the walls with tape, and one file was somehow hanging from the ceiling fan. Kwame stood there, his mouth open, his brain trying to calculate how many lifetimes it would take to organize this chaos. Is there a problem? His boss's voice came from behind him. Kwame jumped so high he nearly hit his head on the ceiling. No, sir. No problem. I was just strategizing. Good. I need this done by 6 a.m. tomorrow. Also, the boss handed him a bucket and a mop. The toilet needs cleaning. There's a situation. Sir, I thought I was hired for administrative work. Did you or did you not say you could handle pressure? Yes, sir. Then handle it. The toilet situation turned out to be worse than Kwame's worst nightmare. He would not speak of it for years to come. Some traumas are too deep for words.